A brutal hand swung toward a 78-year-old widow's face in a packed diner. Every customer froze. No one moved. No one breathed. Wade Brennan's gold ring glinted under the lights, his arm cutting through the air with savage force. Grace Hartwell closed her eyes, bracing for impact. But the blow never landed. A hand shot out from nowhere and locked around Wade's wrist like a steel vice. The grip was so powerful that Wade's entire body jerked to a halt. Standing behind him was a stranger with cold blue eyes and a Belgian Malinois at his side. "You don't want to do that." Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. Subscribe now and stay with us until the very end. This story will change how you see courage, family, and justice forever. The morning had started like any other for Grace Hartwell. She woke at 5:47 a.m., the same time she'd risen for the past 53 years of her marriage. Old habits die hard. Her husband James had been gone for 18 months now, but her body still remembered his rhythm, still expected to feel his warmth on the other side of the bed. She touched the worn firefighter's jacket hanging by the door. James's jacket. The one he'd worn for 31 years protecting the people of Pine Hollow, Montana. The one that still smelled faintly of smoke and Old Spice. She put it on every morning now. It was like wearing his arms around her. "I'm going to the diner today, James," she whispered to the empty cabin. "I know you'd tell me to stay home, but I'm tired of hiding." For 3 weeks, she had been a prisoner in her own home. Anonymous letters under her door. Her mailbox smashed twice. Dead animals left on her porch. All because she refused to sell the lakefront property that James had left her. The property his grandfather had built with his own hands in 1952. The property that a group of powerful people wanted very, very badly. Grace Hartwell was done being afraid. She drove her old pickup truck into town, passing Crystal Lake, where the morning mist rose like ghosts dancing on the water. Pine Hollow was a small town, the kind where everyone knew everyone, where secrets were currency, and where the wrong enemies could destroy your life. The Lakeview Diner sat at the heart of Main Street. It had been there since 1968, serving the same coffee, the same pancakes, the same comfort to generations of locals. Grace had eaten her first date meal with James here, had celebrated their anniversaries here, had mourned with the town after his funeral here. She pushed through the glass door. The bell chimed, and every conversation in the room stopped dead. Grace felt the shift immediately. The way eyes darted away from her, the way bodies stiffened, the way the air itself seemed to thicken with tension. She knew that feeling. She'd felt it every time she'd walked into a room for the past 3 weeks. But today there was something different, something worse. Wade Brennan was sitting in the corner booth. He was a big man. The kind of big that comes from years of physical labor mixed with years of beer and bitterness. His face was permanently red, his eyes small and mean, his hands like slabs of meat. He ran Brennan Construction, the only major contractor in town. But everyone knew his real job. Everyone knew he was the one who made problems disappear for the mayor. Everyone knew, and everyone was too afraid to say it out loud. Wade looked up and saw Grace. A slow, ugly smile spread across his face. "Well, well," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Look who finally came out of hiding." Grace kept walking toward the counter. Her heart was pounding, but she kept her spine straight. James had always told her that bullies feed on fear. Show them nothing, and they starve. "Jenny, dear," Grace said to the young waitress behind the counter. Could I get a cup of coffee, please? And maybe a slice of that apple pie if you have any left. Jenny Marsh was 28 years old, with tired eyes and a kind heart. She'd been working at the diner since she was 16, saving money for a future that never seemed to arrive. She looked at Grace with something like admiration and something like terror. "Of course, Mrs. Hartwell. Coming right up." Behind Grace, she heard the heavy thud of boots on linoleum. Wade Brennan was approaching. She could smell him now. Sweat and cheap cologne and menace. "Hey, I'm talking to you, old woman." Grace didn't turn around. She watched Jenny's hands tremble as she poured the coffee. "I heard you the first time, Mr. Brennan. I chose not to respond." A few people in the diner gasped. No one talked to Wade Brennan like that. No one. Wade's hand slammed down on the counter next to Grace, making the coffee cups rattle. "You think you're better than us? You think because your husband was some hero firefighter, you can just ignore me?" Now. Grace turned. She looked up at this man who had terrorized her for weeks, who had sent threatening letters, who had killed her cat and left it on her doorstep. She looked at him, and she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Anger. "My husband was a hero," she said quietly. "He saved lives. He protected people. What do you do, Mr. Brennan? What have you ever done except hurt people and take what isn't yours?" Wade's face went from red to purple. His small eyes bulged. The entire diner held its breath. "You stupid old hag," he hissed. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." "I know exactly who I'm dealing with. A bully, a coward, a man who only feels big when he's scaring old women and threatening families." Grace heard chairs scraping. People were moving away, clearing a path, wanting no part of what was about to happen. She caught Jenny's eye. The young woman was pale, her phone clutched in her hand under the counter. "You're going to regret that," Wade growled. "You and that property of yours. You think those letters were bad? You think that dead cat was bad, lady? I haven't even started." "Then start," Grace said, "because I'm not selling. Not to you. Not to whoever's paying you. Not ever. That land was my husband's dying wish for me, and I will die on it before I let people like you take it." Something snapped in Wade Brennan's eyes. Grace saw it happen. The moment when anger became rage, when intimidation became violence. She knew she had pushed too far. She knew what was coming. But she didn't look away. "You want to die on that land?" Wade's voice had gone quiet, deadly. "That can be arranged." He raised his hand. Grace saw the gold ring on his finger. The one she'd noticed left marks on the faces of other people who'd crossed him. She saw the meaty palm, the thick fingers, the full weight of his arm swinging toward her face. She closed her eyes. And then she heard it. A sound like a thunderclap. A grunt of shock and pain. But it wasn't her pain. She hadn't been hit. Grace opened her eyes. A hand had caught Wade's wrist in mid-swing. Not just caught it. Stopped it completely. The arm was trembling, frozen in place, inches from Grace's face. The hand belonged to a man she had never seen before. He was in his late 30s, with close-cropped dark hair and eyes the color of a winter sky. He wasn't as big as Wade, but there was something about him. Something in the way he stood. Something in the absolute stillness of his body. Something that made Wade Brennan, for the first time Grace had ever seen, look afraid. "You don't want to do that," the stranger said. His voice was calm, almost gentle. But underneath it was something that made Grace's blood run cold. Wade tried to pull his arm free. It didn't move. "Who the hell are you?" Wade sputtered. The stranger didn't answer. He just kept that iron grip on Wade's wrist, applying pressure so slowly, so steadily, that Wade's face began to contort in pain. "Let go of me," Do you know who I am? I know exactly who you are." Grace noticed movement at the stranger's side. A dog. A Belgian Malinois with intelligent eyes and a muscular frame covered in old scars. The dog hadn't barked, hadn't lunged. It simply sat there perfectly still, watching Wade with an intensity that was somehow more terrifying than any growl. "That's my mother you were about to hit," the stranger said. Grace's heart stopped. She looked at the man again. Really looked. And she saw it now. The shape of his jaw. The set of his shoulders. The way his left eyebrow raised slightly when he was angry. Just like James. "Marcus," she whispered. Her son, her boy. The child she had raised and loved and worried about every single day for 38 years. The Navy SEAL who spent more time in classified locations than he did at home. The son who had called her 3 days ago and said he was coming to visit. He had arrived. Right on time. "Hey, Mom," Marcus said, his eyes never leaving Wade. "Sorry I'm late." Wade Brennan was not a stupid man. Cruel, yes. Violent, yes. But not stupid. He could read the situation. He could see the way this stranger moved, the controlled power in his grip, the military precision of his stance. He could see the dog that looked more like a weapon than a pet. And he could see that he had made a terrible mistake. "Look, buddy," Wade said, trying to force a laugh. "This is just a misunderstanding. The lady and I were having a conversation. Got a little heated. No harm done." Marcus released Wade's wrist. The big man stumbled backward, rubbing his arm, his eyes darting around the diner looking for allies. He found none. "A conversation," Marcus repeated. "Is that what you call it? Because from where I was standing, it looked like you were about to assault a 78-year-old woman in front of 30 witnesses." "Nobody saw nothing," Wade said, glancing around. "Right, nobody saw nothing." The diner was silent. People stared at their plates, at the walls, anywhere but at Wade or Marcus, the code of small towns. See nothing, say nothing, stay out of trouble. But Jenny Marsh met Marcus's eyes and gave him a tiny nod. Her phone was still in her hand under the counter. Recording. "Titan," Marcus said quietly. The Belgian Malinois rose to his feet in one fluid motion. He didn't advance on Wade. He simply positioned himself between the bully and Grace, his body a living wall of muscle and teeth and unwavering loyalty. Wade backed up another step. "Call off your dog, man. I don't want any trouble." "You don't want trouble?" Marcus stepped forward, closing the distance. "You've been sending my mother threatening letters for 3 weeks. You killed her cat. You smashed her mailbox. You vandalized her property. And just now you tried to hit her in the face." He was inches from Wade now. His voice still calm, still quiet, still terrifying. "I'd say you want trouble very much. You just didn't expect trouble to hit back. You can't prove any of that. I don't need to prove it. I just need to make sure it stops. Today. Right now. Forever." Wade's bravado was crumbling. Grace could see it in the way his shoulders hunched, the way his eyes kept flicking to the door. He was calculating, measuring his chances, looking for an escape. "This ain't over," Wade muttered. "You don't know how things work in this town. You don't know who you're messing with." "I know exactly how things work in this town. I grew up here, remember. I know that you're an errand boy for bigger men. I know that those bigger men have been buying up lakefront property for years, and I know that my mother's land is the last piece they need." Marcus smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "What I'm telling you, Mr. Brennan, is that the game has changed. My mother is no longer alone, and anyone who threatens her will answer to me." The front door of the diner opened. Sheriff Roy Dawson walked in. He was a large man in his late 50s, with a gut that hung over his belt and a face that had seen too many compromises. He wore his badge like a shield against accountability, his uniform like a costume rather than a calling. He had been sheriff of Pine Hollow for 15 years, and in that time the crime rate had stayed exactly where the mayor wanted it. Low on paper, controlled in reality. "What's going on here?" the sheriff drawled, his eyes taking in the scene. Wade pale and shaken. Marcus coiled and ready, the dog steady as a statue, and Grace still standing at the counter, her coffee untouched. "Just a misunderstanding, Roy," Wade said quickly. "This guy came in and started making threats." Marcus turned to face the sheriff. His expression didn't change, but Grace saw something sharpen in his eyes. Recognition. Assessment. The way a soldier identifies a threat. "There was no misunderstanding, Sheriff," Grace said, finding her voice. "Mr. Brennan attempted to strike me. This man stopped him." Sheriff Dawson looked at Grace the way someone might look at an irritating fly. "Now, Mrs. Hartwell, I'm sure that's not what happened. Wade here is a respected member of our community, probably just a heated discussion that got out of hand." "He raised his hand to hit her," Marcus said. "I stopped him. That's assault." "And who are you exactly?" "Marcus Hartwell. Grace is my mother." Something flickered in the sheriff's eyes. Calculation. Concern. "James Hartwell's boy, the one in the military, Navy SEAL, 11 years. The calculation deepened. Sheriff Dawson was not a stupid man either. He knew what Navy SEALs were capable of. He knew that this was not a situation he could bulldoze through with his usual combination of intimidation and indifference. "Well, Mr. Hartwell, I appreciate your service, but this is Pine Hollow, and we handle our own disputes our own way. I suggest you take your mother home and let me sort this out with Wade." "Sort it out how?" "By letting him walk away, by making sure there's no report filed." "Now there's no need for that kind of talk." "There's every need. My mother has been harassed for weeks. Her property has been vandalized. Her pet was killed. And today she was almost physically assaulted in broad daylight in front of dozens of witnesses." Marcus stepped toward the sheriff. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to take Wade Brennan into custody. You're going to file a report documenting this incident. And you're going to open an investigation into the harassment campaign against my mother. Or I'm going to make some phone calls to people who outrank you by about 15 pay grades." Sheriff Dawson's face hardened. "Are you threatening me, son?" "I'm informing you. There's a difference." The two men stared at each other. The diner was so quiet that Grace could hear her own heartbeat. She could see the sheriff's hand drifting toward his belt, toward his weapon. She could see Marcus tracking the movement with those cold blue eyes. She could see Titan shifting his weight, ready to spring. This was about to get very bad. And then a voice cut through the tension. "Excuse me, Sheriff, I think you should know that I've been filming this entire interaction." Everyone turned. A young woman was standing near the window. Her phone held up the camera, clearly recording. She was in her mid-20s with dark hair and determined eyes. She wore a t-shirt that said, "Hidden America Travel Blog," and carried herself with the confidence of someone who had nothing to lose. "My name is Emma Chen," she continued. "I'm a travel journalist with about 2 million followers across various platforms. I came to Pine Hollow to do a story on charming mountain towns, but I think I just found a much more interesting story." She smiled at the sheriff. "Would you like to comment on camera about why you're trying to protect a man who just attempted to assault an elderly widow?" Sheriff Dawson's face went through several colors. Red, white, purple. He looked at Wade. He looked at Marcus. He looked at the phone, still recording. "Put that away," he growled at Emma. "You can't film in here without permission." "Actually, Montana is a one-party consent state, and I'm in a public place. But I appreciate your concern for legal procedures. Maybe you could show that same concern for the woman who was almost assaulted." Grace felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. She wasn't alone. Not just because Marcus was here, but because someone else was willing to stand up. Someone was willing to see. Someone was willing to speak. "This isn't over," Sheriff Dawson said, echoing Wade's earlier words. "Not by a long shot." He grabbed Wade by the arm. "Come on. We're leaving." "Am I under arrest?" Wade asked, bewildered. "Just come on." They left. The door swung shut behind them, and the diner erupted into whispered conversations, the buzz of people who had witnessed something they never expected to see. The breaking of an unwritten rule, the challenging of an untouchable power. Marcus turned to Emma. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. That video is going to cause a lot of problems for a lot of people." She grinned. "Including me, probably. But I've got a feeling this story is worth it." She walked over to Grace and extended her hand. "Mrs. Hartwell, I'm so sorry that happened to you. Would you be willing to talk to me about what's been going on off the record for now? I just want to understand." Grace took her hand. It was warm, strong, young, and full of a fire that Grace remembered having once long ago. "I think, my dear, that I have a great deal to tell you." Marcus watched the exchange with something approaching satisfaction, but his eyes were still troubled. He knew how these things worked. Wade Brennan was not the real enemy. Sheriff Dawson was not the real enemy. They were pawns, enforcers. The real enemy was still out there, hidden behind shell companies and political connections and layers of deniability. And the real enemy had just been put on notice. "Mom," he said quietly, "we need to get you home. We have a lot to talk about." "I know, sweetheart." Grace finally picked up her coffee and took a sip. It was cold now, but she didn't care. "But first, I'm going to finish my pie. I've been looking forward to it all week, and I'll be damned if Wade Brennan ruins that too." Jenny Marsh set a slice of apple pie on the counter, her hands no longer shaking. She looked at Grace with something like awe. "It's on the house, Mrs. Hartwell." "Nonsense, James always said we pay our own way." "Then consider it a thank you, for showing me that standing up to bullies is possible." Grace smiled. The first real smile in weeks. "It's always possible, dear. It just takes practice." At her feet, Titan let out a soft whine. Marcus looked down at his partner, his best friend, the dog who had saved his life in Afghanistan and carried the scars to prove it. "I know, buddy," he murmured. "I feel it too. This is just the beginning." Outside the diner, Sheriff Dawson was on his phone, his voice low and urgent. "We have a problem. The Hartwell woman's son showed up, Navy SEAL, and there's a journalist. She filmed everything." He listened. His face grew paler. "Yes, sir, I understand. I'll handle it." He hung up and looked at Wade, who was standing by the patrol car, still rubbing his wrist. "What did he say?" Wade asked. "He said to make this go away, whatever it takes." "And how are we supposed to do that?" Sheriff Dawson looked back at the diner. Through the window, he could see Grace Hartwell eating her apple pie, her son standing protectively beside her, the journalist taking notes on her phone. "I don't know yet," he admitted, "but we better figure it out fast, because if we don't, we're all going to burn." He didn't know how right he was. 2,000 miles away, in a glass tower in Denver, a woman named Victoria Ashford was watching the same scene play out on her laptop. Emma Chen had already uploaded a teaser clip. 30 seconds of Wade Brennan's hand being caught in mid-swing. The view count was climbing. 10,000, 20,000, 50,000. Victoria was 45 years old, elegant and ruthless in equal measure. She had built her real estate empire on the simple principle that everyone has a price, and if they don't, everyone has a pressure point. She had acquired properties in 12 states, using methods that ranged from aggressive to illegal. Pine Hollow was supposed to be easy. A small town. A simple land grab. $100 million resort development. Now it was becoming a national story. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she rarely used. "We have a situation," she said when the line connected. "I need you to come to Montana. Tonight." She listened to the response. "I don't care what it costs. I don't care what it takes. I want that property and I want those people silenced." She paused. "And this time make sure there are no witnesses." She hung up and turned back to the video. The view count had crossed 100,000. The game had changed. But Victoria Ashford didn't lose games. She changed the rules. Back in Pine Hollow, Grace finished her pie. Marcus helped her to her feet. Emma promised to call tomorrow. Jenny watched them leave with tears in her eyes. And on the counter next to the empty plate and the cold coffee, Grace left a $20 tip. Because James had always said that generosity was the best revenge. She didn't know that in the next 72 hours her entire world would be turned upside down. She didn't know that the harassment she'd experienced was just the beginning. She didn't know that her husband's death might not have been natural, and she didn't know that the evidence to bring down the entire conspiracy was hidden in her own cabin, waiting to be found. All she knew as she walked out of that diner with her son's arm around her shoulders and a retired military dog at her heels was that for the first time in 18 months, she didn't feel alone. James would have been proud. He would have been so proud. The drive back to the cabin was silent. Grace sat in the passenger seat of Marcus's rented truck, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. Titan lay in the back seat, his head resting on his paws, but his ears were up. Alert. Watching. Marcus checked the rearview mirror for the third time in 2 minutes. "We're being followed," he said. Grace didn't turn around. "The dark blue sedan. You noticed?" "I've been noticing it for 2 weeks. It parks at the end of the road every morning. Watches the cabin. Leaves at sunset." Marcus felt a cold anger settle in his chest. 2 weeks. His mother had been under surveillance for 2 weeks and she hadn't told him. Hadn't wanted to worry him. Hadn't wanted to pull him away from his duties. "Why didn't you call me sooner?" "Because you were deployed, sweetheart. Because you have a job to do. Because I thought I could handle it." "Mom, this isn't something you handle alone." Grace finally turned to look at him. Her eyes were tired but fierce. "I've been handling things alone since your father died. I've been handling the grief, the loneliness, the empty house, the memories in every corner." Her voice cracked slightly. "I didn't want to burden you with more." Marcus pulled the truck to the side of the road. He put it in park and turned to face his mother fully. "You are never a burden. Do you understand me? Never." Grace reached out and touched his face, the same way she had when he was a boy, when he'd come home with scraped knees and bruised pride, when he'd left for boot camp and tried not to cry, when he'd come back from his first deployment with shadows in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "You look so much like him," she whispered, "every day more and more. I wish he was here." "So do I, baby. So do I." They sat there for a moment, mother and son, the weight of loss hanging between them. Then Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his expression hardened. "What is it?" "The video. Emma uploaded a clip. It's already got 200,000 views." Grace's eyes widened. 200,000 in an hour. "Welcome to the internet age, Mom. That clip is going to be everywhere by tonight." He pulled back onto the road. The blue sedan followed at a distance. When they reached the cabin, Marcus did a full sweep. He checked every window, every door, every possible point of entry. Titan moved with him, sniffing corners, investigating shadows. They worked together like the partners. They were a team, forged in combat zones, half a world away. "Clear," Marcus said finally. Grace had put water on for tea. Her hands were shaking slightly, the adrenaline of the morning finally catching up with her. She sat at the kitchen table, James's jacket still wrapped around her shoulders. "Tell me everything," Marcus said, pulling up a chair across from her. "From the beginning. Don't leave anything out." So Grace told him. She told him about the first letter that had arrived 3 weeks ago. Typed, anonymous. Simple message: sell the property, leave town. This is your only warning. She told him about the second letter, more threatening. "We know you're alone. We know your routines. Accidents happen to stubborn old women." She told him about finding her cat Whiskers on the front porch. The cat James had given her the Christmas before he died. The cat that had been her only company in the long, lonely nights. Her voice broke when she talked about Whiskers. Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm so sorry, Mom. He was just a cat, I know that. But he was family. I understand." Grace wiped her eyes and continued. She told him about the vandalism, the slashed tires, the broken mailbox, the word "leave" spray painted on the side of the cabin. She told him about going to the sheriff, about filing reports that disappeared, about being told she was imagining things and overreacting. "Dawson is dirty," Marcus said. It wasn't a question. "Everyone knows it, no one says it. He's been the sheriff for 15 years, and in all that time, certain people have never been touched. Wade Brennan, Mayor Griggs, the developers who've been buying up the lakefront." "What developers?" "A company called Ashford Holdings. They've bought 15 properties around Crystal Lake in the last 3 years. Always the same pattern. The owners get harassed. Things happen. Accidents, threats. Eventually they sell for a fraction of what the land is worth." Marcus leaned back in his chair. He was putting the pieces together. And Dad's property is the last piece they need. The biggest piece, the best piece. Right on the point with the deepest water access and the most beautiful views. Your father's grandfather built this cabin with his own hands. The land has been in the Hartwell family for 70 years. And they want it. They want it badly enough to kill for it. The words hung in the air. Marcus stared at his mother. "What did you just say?" Grace's face had gone pale. She hadn't meant to say it. The thought had been lurking in the back of her mind for months, but she'd never spoken it aloud, never given it the weight of words. "Your father," she said slowly. "The night he died. He was working on something. He'd been staying up late going through old town records, making phone calls. He was agitated, worried. He wouldn't tell me what it was about, but he said he was going to blow the whole thing wide open." Marcus felt his blood run cold. "What whole thing?" "I don't know. He died the next morning. Heart attack. At least that's what the coroner said." "You don't believe it?" "Your father ran 5 miles every morning. He ate right. He took care of himself. He'd had a full physical 2 months before, and the doctor said his heart was strong." Grace's voice was barely a whisper now. "And then one morning he just collapsed. In the kitchen. Making coffee. Gone before the ambulance could get here." Marcus stood up so fast his chair scraped across the floor. Titan's head snapped up, sensing his partner's agitation. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because I had no proof. Because I thought I was being paranoid. Because I didn't want to believe that someone could murder my husband and get away with it." "But now," Grace looked at him with eyes that held 18 months of suppressed grief and growing suspicion. Now I think James found something these people would kill to protect, and I think whatever he found is still here, in this cabin, waiting for someone to find it. Marcus's mind was racing. His father had been investigating something connected to the land grab, something big enough to get him killed, and whatever evidence he'd gathered might still be hidden somewhere in this house. "I need to search the cabin," he said, "every inch of it. Marcus, I've been living here for 18 months. If there was something to find, you weren't looking. You were grieving. There's a difference." His phone buzzed again. He glanced at it. 3 messages from Emma Chen. The video had crossed 500,000 views. News outlets were picking it up. His name was being mentioned. And then a 4th message. "Someone just broke into my cabin. They destroyed everything." Marcus called her immediately. "Emma, are you okay?" "I'm fine. I wasn't there. I went to the general store after I left the diner, and when I came back..." Her voice was shaking. "My laptop, my cameras, my hard drives, everything is smashed. They even took my backup batteries." "Did you call the police?" A bitter laugh. "What police, Sheriff Dawson?" "The same sheriff who watched Wade Brennan try to assault your mother and did nothing." She had a point. "Where are you now?" "Sitting in my car outside what's left of my cabin. I don't know where else to go." Marcus made a decision. "Come to my mother's place. I'll text you the address. You'll be safe here." "Are you sure I don't want to put you in more danger?" "Emma, they already know where we are. They've been watching us for weeks. At this point, strength in numbers is our best option." He hung up and turned to his mother. "We're about to have a house guest." The journalist, they destroyed her equipment, tried to silence her. It didn't work. The video is already out there, 500,000 views and climbing. Grace nodded slowly. "Good. Let them come. Let the whole world see what's happening in this town." 20 minutes later, Emma Chen pulled up in a dusty rental car. Her hands were still trembling when she walked through the door, but her eyes were blazing with determination. "I've been a journalist for 6 years," she said, accepting a cup of tea from Grace. "I've covered corruption in 3 states. I've been threatened before, but I've never had someone physically destroy my equipment," and she took a shaky breath. "These people are serious." "These people are desperate," Marcus corrected. "The video going viral changed everything. They're in damage control mode now." "What do we do?" "First, we document everything. You said the video is already uploaded." "To my cloud. They destroyed the hardware, but the footage is safe. I've got copies on 3 different servers. These idiots don't understand how the internet works." Marcus almost smiled. "Good. What about the full footage? Not just the clip. 45 minutes of everything, from the moment your mother walked in until she left, including the sheriff's attempted cover-up." "That's leverage. That's evidence." Titan padded over to Emma and sniffed her hand. After a moment, he sat down beside her, a silent endorsement. Emma reached down and scratched behind his ears. "He likes you," Grace said. "He's a good judge of character," Marcus replied. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered it anyway. "Is this Marcus Hartwell?" A woman's voice. Cultured. Nervous. "Who's asking? My name is Diane Griggs. I'm the mayor's wife. Please don't hang up." Marcus put the phone on speaker. Grace and Emma leaned in. "I'm listening." "I saw what happened at the diner. The video. I've watched it 17 times. Her voice was trembling. "What Wade did to Mrs. Hartwell, I can't stay silent anymore." "Silent about what?" "Everything. The land grab, the harassment, the payoffs." A pause. "And what happened to James Hartwell?" Grace's hand flew to her mouth. Marcus gripped the phone tighter. "What do you know about my father? I know he was asking questions. I know my husband was furious about it. I know that 2 days before Mr. Hartwell died, my husband had a meeting with Wade Brennan and Sheriff Dawson. I heard them talking through the wall of his study. Her voice dropped to a whisper. They said, "The firefighter is becoming a problem. Time to put out the fire." The room went completely silent. "Mrs. Griggs," Marcus said slowly, "are you saying my father was murdered?" "I'm saying I don't know for certain, but I'm saying I have evidence that might prove it. Recordings, documents, bank statements showing payoffs, everything my husband thought was safely hidden." A desperate edge crept into her voice. "I've been living with this guilt for 18 months. I watched them terrorize your mother. I watched them destroy this town. And I did nothing. I was a coward, Amtsu. Why are you calling now? Because of what I saw in that video. Not Wade, not your son, your mother, Mrs. Hartwell. The way she stood up to him. The way she refused to back down." Diane's voice broke. "She was braver in 5 minutes than I've been in 25 years of marriage. I want to be brave now. I want to make it right." Emma was already taking notes. Grace was crying silently. Marcus was calculating. "What do you want?" "I want to give you everything, the evidence. All of it. But it has to be tonight. My husband is already suspicious. He knows something is wrong. If he finds out what I've taken—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. "Where and when?" "There's an old church on the edge of town, St. Michael's. It's abandoned. No one goes there anymore. Midnight." "I'll be there." "No, not you. Your mother." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Absolutely not. It has to be her. I don't trust anyone else. I've seen what your mother is made of. I need to look her in the eye when I hand this over. I need to know it's going to someone who won't back down." Grace spoke up. "I'll do it." "Mom, no. Marcus, this woman is risking everything to help us. The least I can do is meet her. It could be a trap. It could be the truth. And if it is, if she really has evidence about what happened to your father—" Grace's voice hardened. "Then I'm going. With or without your blessing." Marcus stared at his mother. He saw the determination in her eyes. The same determination he'd seen in James's eyes 1,000 times. The same determination that ran through his own veins. "Fine," he said finally. "But I'm coming with you. I'll stay out of sight, but I'll be there. If anything goes wrong—" "It won't. If anything goes wrong," he repeated, "you run. You don't argue. You don't negotiate. You run, and you let me handle it." Grace nodded. "Deal." Emma looked between them. "This is insane. You know that, right?" "Welcome to Pine Hollow," Grace said with a small smile. "Where insane is just another Tuesday." The hours until midnight crawled by. Marcus spent them preparing. He checked the cabin's security. He planned escape routes. He briefed Emma on what to do if they didn't come back. "If we're not back by 2 a.m., you take everything you have, you get in your car, and you drive straight to the FBI field office in Helena. Don't stop. Don't talk to anyone. Just drive. And leave you behind. If something happens to us, you're the only one who can tell this story. The video, the evidence, everything. You're our insurance policy." Emma's face was pale, but she nodded. "I understand." At 11:30, Marcus, Grace, and Titan loaded into the truck. The night was cold and clear, the stars bright overhead. As they drove toward town, Marcus kept checking the mirrors. "The sedan isn't following us," he said. "Is that good or bad? I don't know yet." St. Michael's Church loomed at the edge of town like a forgotten monument. Its steeple was dark against the night sky, its windows boarded up, its doors hanging off their hinges. It had been abandoned for 15 years, ever since the congregation moved to a newer building on the other side of town. Marcus parked 200 yards away. He turned to his mother. I'm going to circle around, find a position where I can see the entrance. You wait 10 minutes, then walk in. If Diane is there, get the evidence and get out. Don't linger. Don't chat. Get what you came for and leave. I understand. Titan will go with you. Grace looked down at the dog, who was watching her with steady, intelligent eyes. He'll protect me. He'll die for you if he has to, but it won't come to that. I won't let it. Grace reached out and squeezed her son's hand. Your father would be so proud of you. Let's make sure you're around to tell me that when this is over. Marcus slipped out of the truck and disappeared into the darkness. Grace waited, counting the seconds, her heart pounding in her chest. 10 minutes. She opened the door and stepped out. Titan jumped down beside her, pressing close to her leg. Together they walked toward the church. The doors creaked when she pushed them open. Inside the church was a shell of its former self. Pews overturned. Hymnals scattered across the floor. Moonlight streaming through cracks in the boarded windows. And there, standing in the center of the aisle, was Diane Griggs. She was a small woman, elegantly dressed, even in the middle of the night. Her face was lined with fear and exhaustion, but her eyes were clear, determined. Mrs. Hartwell, you came. You said you had something for me. Diane reached into her bag and pulled out a manila envelope. It was thick, heavy, full of secrets. Everything is in here. Bank records showing payments from Ashford Holdings to my husband, to the sheriff, to Wade Brennan. Recordings of meetings where they discussed how to force people off their land. And, she hesitated, and a recording from 2 days before your husband died. Grace's breath caught. What's on it? Your husband called my husband. He said he had evidence of fraud. He said he was going to the state attorney general. My husband told him to think carefully about his next move. Diane's voice was barely audible. And then he said, this town has a way of dealing with troublemakers. Don't make us deal with you. Grace took the envelope. Her hands were shaking. I'm sorry, Diane whispered. I'm so sorry I didn't come forward sooner. I was afraid. I'm still afraid. What are you going to do now? I'm leaving. Tonight. I have a sister in Oregon. I'll stay with her until this is over. She looked at Grace with tears in her eyes. Make them pay. For what they did to your husband. For what they've done to this town. Make them pay. I will. Diane turned to leave, then stopped. Mrs. Hartwell, your husband was a good man. He loved this town. He loved you. The last thing he said to my husband was, some things are worth dying for. I didn't understand then. I do now. She walked out of the church and disappeared into the night. Grace stood there holding the envelope, feeling the weight of 18 months of questions finally answered. James hadn't just died. He'd been killed, murdered by men who valued money over human life, and now she had the proof. Titan pressed against her leg, whining softly. She looked down at him. Let's go, boy. We have work to do. She walked out of the church, the envelope clutched to her chest. Marcus emerged from the shadows and fell into step beside her. Did you get it? I got everything. Then let's go home and find out exactly what we're dealing with. They drove back to the cabin in silence. Grace didn't open the envelope. She wanted to wait until they were safe, until they were ready, because she knew with a certainty that went bone deep that whatever was in that envelope was going to change everything, and there was no going back. They spread the contents of the envelope across the kitchen table. Grace, Marcus, Emma, and Titan gathered around the cabin's single lamp, casting long shadows across the damning evidence. Bank statements. Dozens of them. Wire transfers from Ashford Holdings to accounts belonging to Mayor Harold Griggs, payments to Sheriff Roy Dawson, monthly deposits into Wade Brennan's construction company that didn't match any legitimate contracts. "My God," Emma whispered. "This is everything. Names, dates, amounts. This isn't just corruption. This is a criminal enterprise." Marcus picked up a photograph. It showed Mayor Griggs shaking hands with a woman in an expensive suit. Behind them, a scale model of a massive resort development. "Victoria Ashford," he said. "The developer. She's been pulling the strings this whole time." Grace wasn't looking at the bank statements. She was holding a small digital recorder, her fingers trembling. This was what Diane had promised. The recording from 2 days before James died. "Mom, you don't have to listen to that right now." "Yes, I do." She pressed play. Static. Then voices. James's voice strong and clear and alive. "I know what you've been doing, Griggs. I've got it all documented. The fraud, the intimidation, the families you've driven out of their homes." Mayor Griggs's response was cold. "You're making a big mistake, Hartwell. You've been a hero in this town for 30 years. Don't throw that away over something you don't understand." "I understand perfectly. You and your friends have been stealing people's land for years. Well, it stops now. I'm taking everything I have to the State Attorney General tomorrow morning." A long pause. Then Griggs again, his voice dropping to something darker. "This town has a way of dealing with troublemakers, James. Don't make us deal with you." "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact. Pine Hollow has survived for 100 years because people know when to keep their mouths shut. You'd be wise to learn that lesson. And you'd be wise to remember that I've spent my entire life running into burning buildings while other men ran away. I don't scare easy. Everyone scares James. Everyone has something to lose. You have a wife, a son overseas who can't protect you, a beautiful piece of property that would be a shame to see go up in flames. You touch my family, Griggs, and I swear to God, have a good night, Mr. Hartwell. I hope you make the right decision." The recording ended. Grace sat motionless, tears streaming down her face. She had heard her husband's voice for the first time in 18 months, and she had heard the men who killed him threaten everything he loved. "They murdered him," she said, her voice hollow. "They murdered my James." Marcus's jaw was clenched so tight she could see the muscles jumping. His eyes were fixed on some middle distance, and she knew that look. She had seen it on James's face 100 times. It was the look of a man calculating how to destroy his enemies. "Not just murdered," Marcus said quietly. "They made it look natural. A heart attack. No investigation. No questions." He looked at his mother. "Did Dad have any health issues? Anything that could have been exploited?" "He took blood pressure medication. Had for years. It was controlled stable, nothing dangerous." Emma was already typing on her phone. "I'm looking this up. There are drugs that can induce cardiac arrest, especially in someone already on heart medication. Potassium chloride, digoxin overdose. In the right combination, it would look exactly like a natural heart attack." "The coroner," Marcus said. "Who signed the death certificate?" Grace thought back. "Dr. Patterson. He's been the county coroner for 20 years. Is he connected to Griggs?" "I don't know. I never thought to ask." Marcus stood up and walked to the window. The blue sedan was back parked at the end of the road. Watching. Waiting. "They know we have the evidence," he said. "Diane is gone. They'll figure out pretty quickly that she was the leak. And when they do, they're going to come for us." "What do we do?" Emma asked. "We need to get this to the FBI, tonight. But we can't drive out of here. They'll follow us. They might try to stop us." Grace spoke up. "There's another way out. An old logging road behind the property. James showed it to me years ago. It comes out on the highway about 10 miles north of town. Do they know about it? I doubt it. James found it by accident when he was hiking. It's not on any maps. Marcus turned to Emma. You have a satellite phone? No, but I have a signal booster that might get us cell service deep enough in the mountains to make a call. Good. Here's the plan. I'm going to create a distraction. Draw their attention. While they're focused on me, you and my mother take the logging road. Get to the highway. Get a signal. Call the FBI field office in Helena. Tell them everything. What kind of distraction? Grace asked. Marcus smiled grimly. The kind that makes them think I'm the threat. Not you. Before anyone could argue, Titan's head snapped toward the back door. A low growl rumbled in his chest. Someone's out there, Marcus whispered. He killed the lamp. The cabin plunged into darkness. Marcus moved silently to the back window, his eyes adjusting quickly. Titan followed, positioning himself at the door. Two figures were moving through the trees. They were trying to be stealthy, but they were amateurs. Civilians. Marcus had tracked insurgents through Afghan mountains. These men might as well have been carrying neon signs. 2 targets, he murmured. Coming from the east. They'll hit the back door in about 90 seconds. Wade, Grace whispered. Can't tell. But whoever it is, they're not here to talk. Marcus pulled his mother and Emma toward the front of the cabin. New plan. You both go now. Take the truck. I left the keys in the ignition. Drive fast, don't stop, and don't look back. I'm not leaving you, Grace said firmly. Mom, this isn't a discussion. You're right, it's not. I spent 18 months hiding while these men terrorized me. I spent 18 months grieving while they walked free. I am done running. There was something in her eyes that Marcus recognized. The same stubborn courage that had carried his father into burning buildings. The same unbreakable will that had raised him to become the man he was. Fine, he said. Then stay behind me, stay quiet, and do exactly what I tell you. Understood? Grace nodded. Emma clutched the envelope to her chest. What about me? You're the insurance policy. Remember, if this goes bad, you run. You take that evidence and you get it to the FBI. Whatever it takes. A crash from the back of the cabin, the door splintering, heavy footsteps. They're in, Marcus said. Move. He pushed the women toward the front door. Titan stayed at his side muscles, coiled, ready to spring. A flashlight beam cut through the darkness. A voice called out. We know you're in here, Hartwell. Make this easy on yourself. Hand over what the mayor's wife gave you, and maybe we let you walk away. Marcus recognized the voice. Wade Brennan. You really want to do this? Marcus called back. After what happened at the diner, after the video. The video don't matter. By tomorrow, this whole thing will be buried. The sheriff's already got a story ready. The journalist attacked you first. You defended yourself. Tragic accident. Is that what you're going to tell yourself when you're in federal prison? Wade laughed. Federal prison, son, there ain't no feds coming. This is Pine Hollow. What happens here stays here. Marcus heard a second set of footsteps. Another man. He couldn't see him, but he could feel him circling around, trying to flank. Titan, Marcus whispered. Quiet. Watch. The dog understood. He slipped into the shadows, silent as death tracking the second intruder. Marcus kept talking, buying time. Wade, let me tell you how this is going to go. In about 5 minutes, you're going to realize you made the biggest mistake of your life. In about 10 minutes, you're going to be begging me to let you cooperate. And in about an hour, you're going to be explaining to federal agents why you broke into a military veterans home with intent to commit violence. Big talk from a man hiding in the dark. I'm not hiding. I'm waiting. Waiting for what? A scream split the air. The second intruder had found Titan. Or rather, Titan had found him. Marcus moved. He crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbed Wade's flashlight arm, and twisted. The flashlight went flying. Wade went down his face, slamming into the floor with a satisfying crack. "That," Marcus said, pressing his knee into Wade's back. "I was waiting for that." Wade struggled, but it was useless. Marcus had subdued men twice as dangerous in conditions 100 times worse. A Montana bully was nothing. "Get off me. You're assaulting an officer of the law." "You're not an officer of anything. You're a thug in a contractor's jacket." Marcus leaned down, his voice dropping to a whisper. "And you're going to tell me everything, starting with what really happened to my father." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Wrong answer." Marcus applied pressure to a nerve point in Wade's shoulder. The big man screamed. Okay, I'll talk. Who killed James Hartwell?" "I don't know. I swear Griggs and Dawson handled that themselves. They didn't trust anyone else." "What did they use?" "Some kind of drug. Dawson's brother-in-law is a pharmacist. He got them something, I don't know what. They put it in his coffee. Made it look like his heart gave out." Grace's hand flew to her mouth. She had made James coffee that morning. She had poured it for him, kissed him goodbye, watched him drink it. And then she had found him on the floor, clutching his chest, gasping for air. She had been the one to hand him the cup that killed him. "Mom," Marcus said, seeing her face. "This is not your fault. Do you hear me? This is not your fault." But Grace wasn't listening. She was remembering. James had complained that the coffee tasted strange that morning. Bitter. She had laughed and said he was imagining things. He hadn't been imagining anything. From outside they heard sirens. Red and blue lights flickered through the windows. "Cavalry's here," Wade sneered. "You're finished, Hartwell." "That's what you think?" But Marcus felt a cold knot form in his stomach. The sheriff. More of Griggs's men. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped. He looked at Emma. "You need to go. Now. The logging road. Get the evidence out." "I can't leave you. You have to. We knew this might happen. The plan doesn't change." Grace grabbed Emma's hand. "He's right. Go. Whatever happens to us, make sure the truth gets out." Emma's eyes were filling with tears. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be fast." Emma ran. Out the back door, past the man still pinned under Titan's weight, into the darkness of the forest. She carried the envelope against her chest like a shield. The sirens were getting closer. Marcus hauled Wade to his feet. "You're going to tell the sheriff exactly what you told me. Every word." "He won't believe me. He's in on it." "Then he'll have to arrest us both. And once we're in custody, once there are official records, once this becomes public, his whole operation falls apart." Wade's face went pale. "You're crazy." "I'm a Navy SEAL. There's a difference." The front door burst open. Sheriff Dawson stepped in, weapon drawn, flanked by 2 deputies. "Nobody move." Marcus raised his hand slowly. "Evening, Sheriff. Glad you could join us. Your friend Wade here was just confessing to breaking and entering, and to conspiracy to commit murder." Dawson's face twisted. "Shut up. On the ground. Now." "I don't think so." "I said get on the ground. And I said no." When Marcus's voice was calm, almost conversational. "Here's what's happening, Sheriff. Right now there's a journalist with documented evidence of every crime you and your friends have committed in the last 3 years. She's on her way to the FBI. By morning, this will be federal jurisdiction. So you can arrest me right now, create more witnesses, more paperwork, more attention. Or you can walk away and start preparing your defense." Dawson's gun hand was shaking. He looked at Wade, broken and bleeding on the floor. He looked at Marcus, standing like a rock in the middle of the room. He looked at Grace, her eyes blazing with fury and grief. "You don't know who you're dealing with," Dawson said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with. A small-town sheriff who got in over his head. A man who thought he was untouchable until someone touched back." Marcus took a step forward. "My father died because of you. My mother has been terrorized for weeks because of you. And now you're standing in my home pointing a gun at me, and you think I'm the one who doesn't understand the situation." Titan had released the second intruder and repositioned himself at Marcus's side. The dog's eyes were locked on the sheriff, his body low, ready to strike. "Call off your dog," Dawson ordered. "Call off your corruption." Long seconds passed. The deputies looked at each other uncertain. They hadn't signed up for this. They were small-town cops who wrote traffic tickets and broke up bar fights. They weren't prepared for a standoff with a Navy SEAL. Finally, Dawson lowered his weapon. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes, it is. You just don't know it yet." The sheriff backed toward the door, his deputies following. Wade scrambled to his feet and stumbled after them, blood streaming from his broken nose. "You've made enemies tonight, Hartwell," Dawson called from the doorway. "Powerful enemies." "Good. I was getting bored." The door slammed. Engines started. The sirens faded into the distance. Marcus finally let out a breath. His hands were shaking with adrenaline. Titan pressed against his leg, whining softly. "It's okay, buddy. We did it." Grace sank into a chair. Her face was gray, her eyes hollow. "Mom, they killed him," she whispered. "They poisoned his coffee and they killed him, and I handed him the cup. I handed my husband the cup that killed him." Marcus knelt in front of her. "Listen to me. They did this, not you. They are responsible, and I promise you they are going to pay. Every single one of them." His phone buzzed, a text from Emma. "Made it to the highway. Signal strong. Calling FBI now. Stay safe." Marcus showed the message to his mother. "It's done. The evidence is on its way to the right people. By morning this will be federal. Griggs, Dawson, Ashford, none of them will be able to hide." Grace looked at her son, her boy, the man who had grown up to be everything she and James had hoped for. "Your father would be proud of you," she said. "He'd be proud of us both." Outside, the night was quiet. The watchers were gone. The battle was won. But Marcus knew the war was far from over. Somewhere in Denver, Victoria Ashford was learning that her entire operation was about to be exposed. Somewhere in Pine Hollow, Mayor Griggs was realizing that his wife had betrayed him. And somewhere on a dark highway, Emma Chen was speaking to an FBI agent, reciting a list of crimes that would shake the state of Montana to its foundations. The dominoes were starting to fall. And nothing would ever be the same. The FBI arrived at dawn. Grace hadn't slept. Neither had Marcus. They had spent the long hours of the night sitting at the kitchen table drinking coffee that neither of them tasted, waiting for the storm they had unleashed to break. When the black SUVs rolled up the driveway, Grace felt something shift in her chest. Not relief. Not yet. But something close to hope. A woman stepped out of the lead vehicle. She was in her 40s, with sharp features and eyes that missed nothing. She walked with the confidence of someone who had spent her career putting powerful people behind bars. "Mrs. Hartwell, I'm Special Agent Catherine Cole, FBI. We need to talk." Marcus moved to stand beside his mother. "She's been through a lot. Whatever questions you have, I'd like to be present." Agent Cole assessed him with a single glance. "You're the son. The SEAL." "That's right." "Then you already know how this works. Your mother isn't a suspect. She's a witness. And based on the evidence we received last night, she may be the key to bringing down one of the largest corruption networks in Montana history." Grace stood up straighter. "Where do we start?" They started at the beginning. For 3 hours, Grace told her story. The harassment, the threats, the murder of her husband. She answered every question, provided every detail, relived every painful moment. Agent Cole recorded it all, her face impassive, but her eyes growing harder with each revelation. When Grace finished, there was a long silence. "Mrs. Hartwell," Agent Cole said finally, "I've been with the Bureau for 22 years. I've worked organized crime, public corruption, domestic terrorism. But what you've described, what that evidence shows, this is systematic, calculated. And it's been going on for years, right under everyone's noses." "Can you stop them?" Grace asked. "Can you make them pay for what they did to James?" "We're going to do more than stop them. By the end of today, every person involved in this conspiracy will be in federal custody." Agent Cole leaned forward. "But I need you to understand something. This is going to get worse before it gets better. The takedown will be public. The media will be everywhere. Your name, your husband's name, your son's name, they'll be part of the story." "Good," Grace said without hesitation. "Let them tell it. Let everyone know what James died trying to expose." Marcus put his hand on his mother's shoulder. "What's the timeline? We move in 2 hours. Simultaneous arrests. Mayor Griggs, Sheriff Dawson, Victoria Ashford, Wade Brennan, and about a dozen others connected to the scheme." Agent Cole stood up. "I'd recommend you both stay here until it's over. We'll have agents posted outside for your protection." "I want to be there," Grace said. "Ma'am, I don't think... I said I want to be there. When you arrest the men who killed my husband, I want to look them in the eye." Agent Cole studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "All right, but you stay in the vehicle. You don't interfere. You don't speak. You watch, that's all." "That's all I need." 2 hours later, Grace was sitting in the back of an FBI SUV parked down the street from Mayor Harold Griggs's house. Marcus sat beside her, his body tense, his eyes fixed on the front door. Titan lay at their feet, alert and watchful. The street was quiet. Normal. A Tuesday morning in Pine Hollow. People walking dogs, kids waiting for school buses. No one had any idea what was about to happen. Agent Cole's voice crackled over the radio. "All teams in position. Execute on my mark." Grace held her breath. Execute. The world exploded into motion. FBI agents in tactical gear poured out of unmarked vehicles. They hit the mayor's front door with a battering ram. The sound echoed across the quiet street like a thunderclap. Inside the house, Harold Griggs had been eating breakfast. He was still in his bathrobe when they dragged him out, his face a mask of disbelief and terror. His hands were cuffed behind his back, his bare feet scraping against the concrete of his driveway. "This is a mistake," he shouted. "I'm the mayor of this town. You can't do this." Agent Cole stepped in front of him, badge displayed. "Harold Griggs, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, fraud, and obstruction of justice. You have the right to remain silent. I strongly suggest you use it." Griggs's eyes swept the street, searching for allies, for help, for anyone who might save him. They found Grace Hartwell, watching from the SUV. Their eyes met. Grace didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She held his gaze with all the fury and grief of 18 months of mourning, 18 months of not knowing, 18 months of suspecting that her husband's death was not what it seemed. Griggs's face went white. He knew. In that moment he knew that she had been the one to bring him down, the widow he had tried to intimidate, the old woman he had dismissed as harmless. "Get him out of here," Agent Cole ordered. They loaded him into a waiting vehicle. Grace watched until it disappeared around the corner. "One down," Marcus said quietly. 3 to go. The next stop was the sheriff's station. Roy Dawson had gotten word of Griggs's arrest. By the time the FBI arrived, he was in his office frantically shredding documents. Paper was flying everywhere, the machine screaming as it devoured evidence. It wasn't enough. Agents burst through the door. Dawson reached for his weapon, but he was too slow. They had him on the ground before his hand touched the holster. "You're making a mistake," he screamed, his face pressed against the floor. "I'm a law enforcement officer. I have rights." "You have the right to remain silent," an agent replied, cuffing him. "Everything else you thought you had, that's over." They dragged him out past his own deputies' men, who had followed his orders for years without question. Some of them looked away in shame. Others looked like they wanted to applaud. One young deputy, barely out of the academy, stepped forward. "Agent, there's a safe in the back. The sheriff always kept it locked. Nobody else had the combination." Agent Cole smiled grimly. "Show me." The safe contained more evidence than they could have hoped for. Cash, weapons, drugs, and a leather-bound notebook filled with Dawson's handwriting documenting every bribe, every payoff, every dirty deed he had committed in 15 years as sheriff. "He kept records," Agent Cole said, almost laughing. "They always keep records." Wade Brennan was next. He had tried to run. Word of the arrests had spread fast, and Wade had thrown a bag in his truck and headed for the state line. He didn't make it. An FBI roadblock stopped him 30 miles outside of town. He came out swinging throwing punches at agents twice his size. It took 4 men to bring him down. When they finally had him cuffed and bleeding in the back of a vehicle, he was still shouting, "You don't know who you're messing with. I know people. Powerful people. They'll bury you." "The only person getting buried today is you," an agent replied. But the biggest catch was still to come. Victoria Ashford had not been idle. The moment she learned of the arrests, she had activated her escape plan. Private jet, offshore accounts, a destination with no extradition treaty. She had prepared for this possibility years ago. She was a businesswoman. She planned for contingencies. She was in the back of a limousine racing toward the executive airport outside Denver when her phone rang. "Ms. Ashford, we have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "The FBI. They've closed the airspace. Your jet can't take off." Victoria's blood ran cold. "That's impossible. I have clearances. I have contacts." "Not anymore. Whatever you did in Montana, it's bigger than your contacts can handle." She hung up and immediately dialed another number. Her lawyer. Her fixer. The man who had made problems disappear for 2 decades. No answer. She tried again. Nothing. Her driver glanced in the rearview mirror. "Ma'am, there's a vehicle following us." Victoria turned and looked out the back window. A black SUV was behind them, matching their speed exactly. "Lose them." "I can't. There are 2 more ahead." Victoria felt the walls closing in. For the first time in her life, she was trapped. Her money couldn't save her. Her connections couldn't protect her. She was just another criminal running from justice she could no longer escape. The limousine slowed. Stopped. FBI agents surrounded the vehicle. One of them opened her door. "Victoria Ashford, you're under arrest." She stepped out with as much dignity as she could muster. Her suit was immaculate. Her hair was perfect. Her face was a mask of cold fury. "Do you have any idea how much I'm worth?" she said. "My lawyers will have these charges dismissed before the end of the day." Agent Cole was waiting for her. "Your lawyers are already being questioned about their involvement in your criminal enterprise. As for your worth, I'm told federal asset forfeiture laws are going to make a significant dent in that." Victoria's mask cracked. Just for a moment. Just enough to show the fear underneath. "Who did this?" she demanded. "Who gave you the evidence?" Agent Cole leaned in close. "A 78-year-old widow whose husband you had murdered. A woman you thought was nobody. A woman you underestimated. Victoria was loaded into a vehicle and driven away. The Queen had fallen. Back in Pine Hollow, the news spread like wildfire. People gathered in the streets watching FBI vehicles roll through town, watching the powerful men who had terrorized them for years being led away in handcuffs, watching everything they had feared and whispered about finally being dragged into the light. At the Lakeview Diner, Jenny Marsh stood behind the counter, tears streaming down her face. Around her, customers were cheering, hugging, crying. The nightmare was over. The town was free. Emma Chen was there recording everything. Her documentary was going to be incredible. But more than that, she was witnessing something she had never expected to see in her career. Justice. Real, undeniable, complete justice. Her phone rang. It was her editor at a major news network. "Emma, your footage is incredible. We want to do a full special. Prime time. Can you have interviews ready by tomorrow?" "I can have them ready by tonight." She hung up and looked around the diner. So many stories, so many victims, so many people who had suffered in silence because they thought no one would believe them. Now the world would believe them. Now the world would know. Grace and Marcus returned to the cabin that evening. For the first time in weeks, there were no watchers at the end of the road. No threats in the mailbox. No fear in the air. Just peace. Grace sat in James's chair by the window, looking out at Crystal Lake. The water was calm, reflecting the setting sun like liquid gold. "He would have loved this," she said softly, seeing them all taken down, knowing that his work wasn't for nothing. Marcus sat across from her. Titan lay between them, finally relaxed, his head resting on his paws. "Dad started this fight. You finished it." "We finished it. Together." Marcus nodded. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something Grace hadn't seen in 18 months. James's firefighter badge. He had taken it from the evidence table at the FBI office. Agent Cole had let him. "They found this in Griggs's safe," Marcus said. "Dad's badge. He must have taken it as some kind of trophy." Grace's hand trembled as she reached for it. The metal was cold, worn smooth by decades of service. She could almost feel James's heartbeat in it, still present, still strong. "My brave boy," she whispered. She wasn't sure if she was talking about James or Marcus. Maybe both. "Both of my brave boys." That night, Grace slept peacefully for the first time since her husband's death. No nightmares, no fears, just deep healing rest. In the morning, Agent Cole came by with an update. "All four are in federal custody. Griggs tried to make a deal, offered to testify against the others. We turned him down. We don't need him anymore." "What about the others who were involved?" Marcus asked. "The deputies, the pharmacist." "We've got them all. Every single person connected to this scheme is either in custody or cooperating with the investigation. This thing is airtight." Grace spoke up. "And my husband's death. Will there be an official investigation?" Agent Cole's expression softened. "Mrs. Hartwell, based on the evidence recovered from Dawson's safe and the testimony we're already receiving, we're treating your husband's death as a homicide. The coroner who signed his death certificate has already confessed to falsifying the report. James Hartwell didn't die of a heart attack. He was murdered, and the men who killed him are going to spend the rest of their lives in prison." Grace closed her eyes. 18 months. 18 months of doubt, of suspicion, of wondering if she was going crazy. And now, finally, the truth. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking. "Thank you for believing me." "Ma'am, you believed yourself first. You never gave up. You never stopped fighting. Everything that happened here, it happened because of your courage." After Agent Cole left, Marcus found his mother in the kitchen holding James's badge, tears streaming silently down her face. "Mom, I'm all right," she said. "I'm better than all right. I finally know the truth. After all this time, I finally know." "What do you want to do now?" Grace looked up at her son. In his face, she saw James. In his strength, she saw the legacy they had built together. In his eyes, she saw the future. "I want to rebuild," she said. "Not just this cabin. This town. These people have been living in fear for so long. They need someone to show them it's over. They need someone to help them heal." "And you want to be that someone," Grace smiled through her tears. "Your father spent his whole life running into burning buildings to save people. I spent my whole life watching him, supporting him, loving him for it. Maybe now it's my turn. Maybe now I can save something too." Marcus pulled his mother into a hug. She felt small in his arms, fragile, but also strong. Unbreakable. A woman who had stared down corrupt politicians and murderers and never once backed down. "Dad always said you were the bravest person he knew," Marcus murmured. He was right. That afternoon, Jenny Marsh came to visit. She walked up the driveway nervously, not sure if she was welcome. But Grace met her at the door with open arms. "Jenny, sweetheart, come in. I've been hoping you'd come." They sat together in the kitchen, drinking tea, talking. Jenny told Grace about losing her job at the diner for refusing to stay silent. About the fear she had lived with for years, watching Wade Brennan terrorize anyone who crossed him. About the guilt she felt for not speaking up sooner. "You did speak up," Grace said firmly. "You recorded that video. You kept the evidence when you could have destroyed it. You made a difference." "I was just doing what was right." "And that's exactly what heroes do." Jenny's eyes filled with tears. "Mrs. Hartwell, I just wanted to say thank you for standing up to them, for showing the rest of us that it was possible." Grace reached across the table and took the young woman's hand. "Jenny, I'm going to need help. Rebuilding this town, helping these families heal. There's going to be a lot of work ahead. Would you be interested?" "Me, but I'm nobody. I'm just a waitress." "You're not just anything. You're brave, and you're kind, and you care about this community. That's exactly what we need." Jenny looked at Grace with something like wonder. "You really believe that—" "I know it. James always said that heroes don't wear capes. They wear aprons and uniforms and work boots. They're the everyday people who choose to do the right thing even when it's hard." For a long moment, Jenny was silent. Then she nodded slowly. "Okay, I'm in. Whatever you need, Mrs. Hartwell, I'm in." The news broke nationally that night. Every major network carried the story. The corruption scandal in Pine Hollow, Montana, the widow who had brought down a criminal empire, the Navy SEAL who had protected her, the journalist who had documented it all. Emma Chen's footage was everywhere. The clip of Marcus grabbing Wade's wrist had been viewed over 50 million times. The interview she conducted with Grace that afternoon was being called the most powerful testimony against corruption in a decade. But for Grace, sitting in her cabin with her son and her dog, and the badge of the man she loved, the fame didn't matter. What mattered was justice. What mattered was truth. What mattered was the knowledge that James Hartwell's death had not been in vain. That his fight had been finished. That his legacy would live on in the town he had loved and the family he had protected. Outside, the stars were bright over Crystal Lake. Somewhere out there, Grace believed James was watching, smiling, proud. "We did it, my love," she whispered into the night. "We finally did it." And in the silence of the mountains, She could almost hear his voice whisper back, "I knew you would." 3 weeks had passed since the arrests. Pine Hollow was a different town now. The fear that had hung over it for years had lifted like morning fog burned away by sunlight. People walked the streets with their heads up. They made eye contact. They smiled at strangers. Small things, but they meant everything. The federal investigation had expanded beyond anyone's expectations. What had started as a local corruption case had become a multi-state criminal enterprise prosecution. Victoria Ashford's empire was crumbling. Properties she had stolen were being returned to their original owners. Families who had been driven away were coming home. Grace Hartwell stood in the community center watching volunteers set up chairs for the town meeting. Jenny Marsh was directing traffic, her voice confident, her posture straight. She had grown so much in 3 weeks. They all had. "Mrs. Hartwell." A young man approached, clipboard in hand. "The state administrator wants to know if you'll say a few words tonight." "Tell her I'll be honored." Marcus appeared at her side. He was dressed casually now, no longer on constant alert, but his eyes still swept the room, still cataloged exits and potential threats. Some habits never died. "You ready for this?" he asked. "I've been ready for 18 months. I just didn't know it." The community center filled quickly. By 7 o'clock, every seat was taken. People stood along the walls, crowded in the doorways, spilled out onto the sidewalk where speakers had been set up. The whole town had come. Anna Sharma, the state-appointed administrator, took the podium first. She was a practical woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She had arrived a week after the arrests, tasked with putting Pine Hollow back together. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "I know these past few weeks have been difficult. You've watched your leaders be taken away in handcuffs. You've learned things about your town that are painful and disturbing. But tonight isn't about looking back. Tonight is about looking forward." She outlined the recovery plan. New elections for mayor and sheriff. An independent audit of all town contracts. A victims' assistance fund for families who had been targeted. Each announcement drew applause, but Grace sensed the crowd was waiting for something else. Something more. "Before we continue," Anna said, "there's someone who has asked to speak. I'll admit I had reservations about allowing this, but Mrs. Hartwell convinced me that healing requires honesty, even when that honesty is uncomfortable." She stepped aside. Wade Brennan walked through the crowd. The reaction was immediate. Gasps, whispers, a few people stood up as if to leave. Others shouted angry words. Wade kept walking, his head down, his shoulders hunched. He was a different man from the bully who had terrorized this town. Smaller, somehow. Broken. He reached the podium and stood there for a long moment, gripping the edges with white-knuckled hands. "My name is Wade Brennan," he said, his voice rough, "and I've done terrible things." The room went silent. "I'm not here to make excuses. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I'm here because Mrs. Hartwell asked me to come, because she said the only way this town can heal is if everyone knows the truth. All of it." He looked out at the faces staring back at him. People he had grown up with. People he had hurt. People who had every right to hate him. "For 5 years I was the enforcer for Mayor Griggs and his friends. When they wanted someone intimidated, they called me. When they wanted property vandalized, they sent me. When they wanted families scared into selling their homes, I was the one who did it." A woman in the front row started crying. Her husband put his arm around her. They were the Petersons. Wade had slashed their tires and poisoned their dog. They had sold their lakefront cabin for 1/3 of its value and moved to Billings. "I told myself I was just doing a job. I told myself these people were outsiders, that they didn't belong here, that I was protecting our town from change. But that was a lie. The truth is, I was a coward. I was angry at my own life, and I took that anger out on innocent people. I destroyed families. I ruined lives." He paused, swallowing hard. "And 18 months ago, I helped murder a man." The gasp that went through the room was like a physical force. "James Hartwell found out what we were doing. He was going to expose us. Griggs and Dawson decided he had to be stopped. I wasn't there when they did it. But I knew. I knew what they were planning, and I did nothing. That makes me just as guilty." Grace sat in the front row, her hands folded in her lap. Her face was calm, but Marcus could see the effort it took. This was the man who had tried to hit her. The man who had terrorized her. The man who had helped kill her husband. And she had invited him to speak. "I can't undo what I've done," Wade continued. "I can't bring Mr. Hartwell back. I can't give those families their homes back or erase the fear I caused. But I can do something. I can tell the truth. I can cooperate with the investigation. And I can spend the rest of my life trying to make up for even a fraction of the harm I caused." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This is a list. Every family I targeted. Every property I vandalized. Every person I threatened. Starting tomorrow, my construction company is going to repair every piece of damage. Free of charge. And any family that was driven out of Pine Hollow, if you want to come back, I'll build you a new home with my own hands." He set the paper on the podium. "I know this doesn't fix anything. I know it doesn't earn forgiveness, but it's all I have to offer. That and this." He looked directly at Grace. "Mrs. Hartwell, your husband was the best man I ever knew. When I was a kid, he pulled me out of a burning house, saved my life, and 20 years later I helped the men who killed him." His voice broke. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. If I could trade places with him, I would. In a heartbeat." He turned and walked away from the podium. The crowd parted for him, silent, uncertain. No one moved to stop him. No one moved to comfort him. He walked out of the community center and disappeared into the night. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Grace Hartwell stood up. She walked to the podium slowly, her steps measured, her head held high. She wore James's firefighter jacket over her dress. The badge Marcus had recovered was pinned over her heart. "My husband loved this town," she said, her voice carrying clear and strong. "He spent 31 years protecting it, running into danger while others ran away, putting his life on the line for people he'd never met. That's who James Hartwell was. That's the man they took from me." She paused, gathering herself. "For 18 months I lived with questions. Was it really a heart attack? Did he suffer? Was there something I could have done? The not knowing was worse than the grief. It ate at me every single day." Her eyes swept the room. "Now I know the truth. My husband was murdered because he tried to do the right thing. Because he refused to stay silent while innocent people were hurt. Because he was brave." She straightened her shoulders. "I could have spent the rest of my life being angry, being bitter, wanting revenge. And there were moments, believe me, when I did. But that's not what James would have wanted. He didn't fight for vengeance. He fought for justice. He fought for this community. He fought for the idea that ordinary people working together can stand up to bullies and corruption and win." She looked toward the door where Wade had exited. "That man who just spoke did terrible things, unforgivable things. But he stood up here tonight and told the truth. He took responsibility. He offered to make amends. That took courage. Maybe not the same kind of courage my husband had, but courage nonetheless." The room was utterly still. "I'm not saying we should forgive him. I'm not saying we should forget. What I'm saying is that we have a choice. We can stay stuck in the past, drowning in anger and fear, or we can move forward. We can rebuild. We can become the community my husband believed we could be. She stepped back from the podium. James Hartwell gave his life for Pine Hollow. Let's make sure it wasn't in vain. The applause started slowly. One person, then two. Then a wave building and building until the entire room was on its feet, cheering, crying, reaching out to touch Grace as she walked back to her seat. Marcus was waiting for her. He pulled her into a hug, his eyes wet. "Dad would be so proud of you," he whispered. "I know," she said. "I can feel him." The meeting continued, but the tone had changed. What had started as a procedural gathering had become something else, a catharsis, a turning point. People who had been afraid to speak for years stood up and shared their stories, victims of Griggs's scheme, families who had suffered in silence. Each testimony was a wound being lanced, the poison finally draining away. By the end of the night, something had shifted in Pine Hollow. The old fear was gone. In its place was something new, something fragile but real. Hope. The weeks that followed were filled with hard work. Grace threw herself into the recovery effort with an energy that surprised everyone, including herself. She joined the Citizen Oversight Committee that Anna Sharma had established. She visited families who had been victimized. She worked alongside Jenny Marsh to turn the Lakeview Diner into a community hub, a place where people could gather, share their stories, and begin to heal. Emma Chen stayed in town longer than she had planned. Her documentary had become something more than a career opportunity. It had become a calling. She filmed the recovery process with the same intensity she had filmed the crisis. The good and the bad. The breakthroughs and the setbacks. The moments of grace and the moments of pain. "This isn't just a story about corruption," she told Grace one afternoon. "It's a story about resilience, about ordinary people standing up against impossible odds. That's what people need to see." Marcus had extended his leave indefinitely. He couldn't bring himself to go back to his unit, not while his mother was building something so important. His commanding officer understood. "Family photo first," he'd said. "Always." So Marcus stayed. He helped rebuild the properties that Wade's crew was repairing. He volunteered with the sheriff's office, which was now being run by a retired state trooper until elections could be held. He became a familiar sight in town, the quiet man with the military bearing, and the loyal dog always at his side. And Titan became something more than a pet. The children of Pine Hollow had been terrified of the Belgian Malinois at first. He was big-scarred with an intensity that made adults nervous. But slowly, tentatively, they began to approach him. A wave from across the street. A shy pat on the head in the park. Before long, Titan had a following of young admirers who competed for the privilege of throwing his ball. "He's the town guardian," one little girl announced solemnly. "He protects us from bad guys." Her mother, watching from a nearby bench, didn't correct her. 1 month after the town meeting, the trials began. Mayor Harold Griggs went first. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Diane's recordings, the financial documents, Wade Brennan's testimony. The prosecution presented a picture of systematic corruption stretching back nearly a decade. Griggs tried to mount a defense. He claimed he had been manipulated by Victoria Ashford. He claimed he hadn't known about James Hartwell's murder. He claimed he was a victim, too. No one believed him. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 35 years in federal prison. He would die there. Sheriff Roy Dawson was next. His trial was shorter. The evidence from his own safe, combined with Wade's testimony, left no room for doubt. 25 years. Victoria Ashford fought the hardest. She hired the best lawyers money could buy. She filed motion after motion, trying to delay, trying to find loopholes, trying to buy her way out like she had bought her way out of everything else. It didn't work. The FBI had been thorough. They had traced her crimes across 6 states. Money laundering, fraud, conspiracy, and at the center of it all, the murder of James Hartwell. 40 years. When the verdict was read, Grace was in the courtroom. She watched Victoria's face crumble, watched the mask of power and privilege finally shatter. For just a moment, she felt a surge of satisfaction, of victory. Then she thought of James, and the satisfaction faded. No verdict could bring him back. No sentence could fill the hole in her heart. But at least finally, there was justice. Wade Brennan's sentencing was the last and the most complicated. He had cooperated fully with the investigation. He had testified against the others. He had kept his promise, spending every day rebuilding the properties he had destroyed, working alongside the families he had victimized. But he had also helped plan a murder. He had terrorized innocent people for years. He had tried to assault Grace in front of dozens of witnesses. The prosecution asked for 20 years. Grace asked to speak. She stood before the judge, her voice steady. "Your Honor, I have more reason than anyone to want this man punished. He helped the people who killed my husband. He tried to hurt me. He terrorized this community for years. If anyone deserves the maximum sentence, it's Wade Brennan." She paused. "But that's not what I'm asking for." The courtroom stirred. "In the weeks since his arrest, I've watched Mr. Brennan do something I didn't think he was capable of. I've watched him take responsibility. I've watched him work day after day to repair the damage he caused. I've watched him face the families he hurt and accept their anger without making excuses." She looked at Wade, who sat at the defense table with his head bowed. "My husband believed in redemption. He believed that people could change, that second chances matter. He spent his life giving people the chance to be better than they were." Her voice wavered just slightly. "If James were here, I think he would say that Wade Brennan has earned a chance. Not freedom, not forgiveness, but a chance to continue making amends. A chance to become something other than what he was." The judge listened. He considered. And in the end, he sentenced Wade Brennan to 5 years with the possibility of parole after 3 for good behavior. It was more mercy than Wade deserved. He knew it. Everyone knew it. As they led him away, he stopped in front of Grace. "I won't waste this," he said, his voice thick. "I swear to you, I won't waste this." "See that you don't." She watched him go, feeling something she hadn't expected. Not forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But something close to peace. 6 months later, Pine Hollow held its first elections since the scandal. The turnout was the highest in the town's history. Every registered voter came to the polls. They elected a new mayor, a retired schoolteacher named Margaret Chen, no relation to Emma. They elected a new sheriff, a young woman named Sarah Whitehorse, who had grown up on the reservation outside town and had spent 10 years with the state police. Change was coming to Pine Hollow. Real change. Grace stood outside the cabin on the morning of the election results, watching the sun rise over Crystal Lake. Titan sat beside her, his gray muzzle resting on her knee. Marcus was inside making coffee, humming a song James used to sing. "We did it, James," she whispered to the morning air. "We really did it." The wind stirred the trees. Somewhere a bird began to sing. And Grace Hartwell, the widow they had tried to break, smiled. Emma's documentary premiered 3 months after that. It was called The Widow and the Wolf, a reference to both Grace and Titan. It aired on a major streaming platform and was watched by 20 million people in the first week. The story of Pine Hollow became a national conversation about corruption, courage, and the power of ordinary people to change their communities. Grace became something of a celebrity, though she never sought it. She gave interviews reluctantly. She declined book deals and speaking tours. She had no interest in fame. What she had interest in was Pine Hollow. She served on the Oversight Committee for 2 more years. She helped establish a scholarship fund in James's name for young people who wanted to pursue careers in public service. She mentored Jenny Marsh, who had enrolled in community college and was studying business administration. Marcus eventually returned to active duty. His unit needed him. The world was still dangerous, and there were still people who needed protecting. But he came home whenever he could. The cabin on Crystal Lake was his anchor, his reminder of what he was fighting for. Titan stayed with Grace. He was too old for combat now, his muzzle fully gray, his steps a little slower. But he was still a guardian. He still walked the streets of Pine Hollow like he owned them. Children still waved to him. Adults still felt safer when he was around. The town's unofficial protector. The silent promise that the darkness would never return. On the 2nd anniversary of James's death, Grace held a small ceremony at the cabin. Just family. Just friends. Jenny was there. Emma flew in from New York. Anna Sharma came, and Margaret Chen and Sarah Whitehorse, the people who had helped rebuild Pine Hollow from the ashes. They gathered on the dock as the sun set over Crystal Lake. Grace held a small urn containing some of James's ashes. She had scattered the rest at the fire station where he had served for 31 years. James Hartwell was a hero, she said, her voice strong despite the tears on her cheeks. Not because he did extraordinary things, but because he did ordinary things with extraordinary love. He protected people. He served his community. He stood up for what was right, even when it cost him everything. She knelt and released the ashes into the water. Rest now, my love. Your fight is over. Your legacy lives on. And I will carry you with me in my heart until we meet again. Marcus put his arm around her. Titan pressed against her leg. The setting sun painted the lake in shades of gold and crimson. And Grace Hartwell, the woman who had refused to break, who had stood against corruption and murder, and won, finally, let herself grieve. Not for what she had lost, for what she had found. 3 years later, a young journalist came to Pine Hollow to do a follow-up story. She found a town transformed. Property values had recovered. New businesses had opened. Families who had been driven away had returned. The Lakeview Diner was thriving under Jenny Marsh's management. The fire station had been renamed the James Hartwell Memorial Station. And on the shore of Crystal Lake, in a cabin built by hands that had loved this land for 70 years, an 81-year-old woman sat on her porch with a gray-muzzled dog at her feet. Mrs. Hartwell, the journalist said, what would you say is the legacy of everything that happened here? Grace thought for a long moment. The legacy, she said finally, is that good people standing together can overcome anything. Fear, corruption, even death. My husband taught me that. This town taught me that. And I hope if nothing else our story teaches other people the same thing. She reached down and scratched Titan behind the ears. Never give up, never back down, never let the bullies win. Because at the end of the day, the only thing evil needs to triumph is for good people to do nothing. And as long as there are good people willing to stand up, evil will never win. The journalist nodded, scribbling notes. And you, Mrs. Hartwell? After everything you've been through, do you have any regrets? Grace smiled. It was the smile of a woman who had walked through fire and emerged stronger. Not one, she said. Not a single one. Behind her, the sun was setting over Crystal Lake, painting the water in colors so beautiful they seemed impossible. Titan yawned and stretched, settling more comfortably against her feet. Somewhere in the distance, a child laughed. And Grace Hartwell, widow, warrior, guardian of Pine Hollow, closed her eyes and let the peace wash over her. She had fought the good fight. She had kept the faith. And she had won. If this story of courage, faith, and redemption touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that honor integrity and uplift the human spirit. Comment below and tell us which moment moved you most. Was it Grace's quiet strength, Marcus's protective love, Wade's unexpected redemption, or Titan's unwavering loyalty? We pray that God blesses each and every one of you watching. May you find the courage to stand up against injustice, the strength to protect those you love, and the faith to believe that good will always triumph over evil. If you believe that light will scatter the darkness, that justice will prevail, and that love is stronger than hate, write Amen in the comments below. Thank you for being part of our community. Be safe, be brave, be kind, and never ever stop fighting for what's right.